The ranger heard the adventurer's tale and guided them to the sea. He had seen their quarry. Adam looked on, unsure of this man of the wilds. As they reached the coastline, the ranger whistled, and 3 creatures with horse-like heads burst forth from the sea. Beneath the waves, their finned tails splashed about. The ranger quietly trudged into the water and mounted the nearest beast. Welcome to Mythical Phylogeny Adventures. I'm your guide, Jason. Today, we meet the Hippocampus. Let's take a look at this unique aquatic steed. The hippocampus is the name for part of the brain, yet its name was originally that of a mythical horse from Greek mythology. They serve Poseidon by pulling his chariot. They are often said to have the front half of a horse, and the back half is a fish. Frequently, they are seen with dolphins swimming nearby. They are normally said to be covered in green scales, with fins on their head and back, and have gills. Some claim that if a seahorse lives long enough, it will grow into a hippocampus. They even have influence over the flow of water around them. Yet, while they are predominantly associated with Greek mythology, they do also appear in artwork coming from Lebanon, Phoenicians, and more. Mind you, the images from Lebanon have depicted it as having wings. They were not born like other mythical creatures, yet they were created by Poseidon himself. They are bound to him. If they stray too far, their strength will fade, particularly if they would be to travel onto dry land. Though they are able to live in both salt water and fresh water. And this brings up a bit of limnology, the study of rivers and streams. The ancient Greeks didn't fully understand the water cycle and how evaporation fully worked. Part of their principles of water cycle involved the water flowing from the sea into aquifers and underground rivers back to dry land. Now, underground rivers are pretty common, but they still flow downhill. Regardless, this is a seahorse, which can swim into fresh water. For normal fish to do this, it requires some time to acclimate to the difference in salt and fresh water. This requires changing how their body handles the sodium concentrations. It is possible that they are able to quickly make the changes in the kidneys to switch. Now, let's be honest here. This is actually a very poorly designed body for operating underwater. Have you ever wondered why all fish, sharks, dolphins, and whales look the way they do? That is because it is the most efficient shape for underwater movement. Yes, there are weird ones like lobsters and octopus, but those are different groups. I'm sure you have tried walking in the pool, and that is what is going on here. While horses can swim, they are far from ideal for this. They are meant to pull Poseidon's chariot. Pectoral fins would make much more sense than legs. They swim with something like a doggy paddle, doubly so when pulling a chariot. And there is a strong solution here. Remember, it draws from Poseidon for power, the literal god of the sea and tides. Someone whose very entity controls the flow of water. And this seems to be how they swim. This is reinforced by the idea which they are capable of creating whirlpools and waves by swimming. Yet, there is another option of theirs. They are also spoken about running on the water. Now, this is actually a common trick of those tied to Poseidon. Even his son Orion was mentioned walking on the water. Now, there is a way to walk on water. Pond skimmer insects and the aptly named Jesus Christ lizard both do so by spreading their weight across the widest possible surface area. Potentially, the hippocampus's hooves are wide enough to achieve the same feat. If not, again, it will need to rely on Poseidon's blessing. Now, as for the rest of their anatomy, it isn't too complicated. We can copy the horse's chest, head, and front legs. After that, we can copy the tail fin of a fish. Mostly a shark being the best option due to the stronger skeleton. Now, shark skeletons are cartilage based, not actual bone, but it would be pretty simple to switch the cartilage for bone and offer more durability. For fish, gills are mentioned being on the equivalent of the neck. For most merfolk, I would recommend placing the gills on the chest for a couple of reasons. 1. Proximity to the heart, and 2. Room for the gills. The neck is filled with the muscles to support the head. For fish gills to operate, they bring water in through their mouth and out the gills. This is why you want to keep the gills close to the respiratory tract. For the hippocampus, I still feel that the flanks are the best to support gill location, but due to the size of its neck, it might be possible to have gills there. Sure, the chest means working around the ribs, but that isn't too terribly complicated, but keeps it closer to the heart. Now, it is rare, but some do have wings. I talked about this with Pegasus and other winged beasts, but their wings would need to be immense to provide flight. And to add this to a sea creature, the wings could aid in swimming if they operate like fins. But to make it fly, we are looking at a wingspan of about 50 to 80 feet, 15.24 meters to 24.4 meters. But thanks to not having the hind legs, we could easily rework the horse's pelvis to function as the wing attachments. But we can't create the bird's unilateral lung system to provide for the high oxygen exchange rate needed for flight like birds, due to adding in their gills. This might be the reason we rarely see winged hippocampus. In addition, if it soars too high, it'll leave Poseidon's domain, and it'll lose its power. Thus, it might be a really weak flyer. And thus, we can get away without the unilateral lung or large wings. They do possess a few other abilities to mention. The froth from their nose and mouth has the power to cleanse a soul. Now, normally, this is that of a divine individual. I couldn't find anything about this happening to a mere mortal, so I can't attest to what effect it would have on you. While traveling at sea, if you see them frolicking, jumping from the water, it means safe traveling and good luck. But if they should disappear, be warned. A storm is about to strike. Lastly, could it be related to other mythical beasts? The Kelpie, or Cheval Malais, is a very strong connection. Those are also water-based horses, yet they have 4 legs. So, how they are related is complicated. It would depend on if it started as a horse that adapted to the sea, or fish that grew legs. And sadly, there isn't enough information to determine this. Seeing as Poseidon was said to create horses in Greek mythology, I would wager it being a horse that adapted to the sea. Human interactions with hippocampus are rare due to them living at sea. But if you find yourself in a fight against them, how would it go? Well, they won't come to land, and you'll be meeting them at sea, which means most encounters will be while you are on a boat. So let's make a few preparations. Get a spell of water breathing, or water walking. It lacks any real weapons. Yes, horse hooves will hurt when struck, but you should have plate armor to limit the damage. It would also limit being bitten. Horse teeth aren't that strong, but it will still hurt. But the real danger will come if it brings forth a wave or whirlpool. If you are on a smaller boat, there is a high chance that you'll get sunk. A larger boat may survive, but it won't be easy. There is a good chance that you'll find yourself in a fierce storm. As for weapons, spears and harpoons are going to be the best. That will give you penetrating power, and it is easier to use in the water. If you are still above the waves, you could use a bow and arrow, but arrows can struggle when striking water. So you'll need to breach the surface. Magic is another story. While you risk shocking yourself, you can use lightning magic to great effect. Ice magic could immobilize it, but unless used as a club or spear, not likely to hurt it. Fire is basically going to be useless, unless you can boil the water around it. But on the ocean, that is going to be an excessive amount of force. There is one guaranteed victory here, if you can get it on land, or out of Poseidon's domain. It will eventually perish. You'll need a net, but a strong telekinesis spell may work. This will probably be the hardest option, yet might be something to try, though some can fly. It would make itself a very large target, to be sure, and would actually leave it weaker. And there is one final issue to contend with. Remember, they have been seen pulling Poseidon's chariot. And who would be riding on that chariot? Oh yeah, it's a god. One that has domain over the ocean. Someone who can bring floods and storms down upon you. So, if you pick a fight with his horses, guess what is going to happen? A god's wrath is a terrible thing to behold, and that will escalate the difficulty of this fight immensely. While the Hippocampus isn't directly powerful, its control of the water will pose an issue if you aren't careful. Outside of that, it doesn't have too many ways to attack, but its location makes those powerful attacks that it does have, and why I am going with a 4 of 10 for difficulty. You'll need to plan ahead if you do get dragged into this fight, but if Poseidon gets drawn in, you will likely sink. Very rarely will you find yourself facing down the Hippocampus. If you do, you could eat its remains, yet that is a complete waste. They can serve as incredible mounts while traveling across the ocean. You have no risk of sinking or getting lost at sea. Sure, it's basically only sea travel, but if you are a merchant, it is incredible. Get them to pull your ship, and you'll be flying over the ocean. Much better than using a sail to travel. But to get that, you'll need Poseidon's blessing. So, if you are a cleric of his, they may come to your aid. In addition, they pose the power to cleanse your soul and restore your strength. That right there is invaluable to a lost sailor. Adam sat upon the Hippocampus's back as it sped through the ocean. Oh, his legs were soaked, but they were going faster than any other route ahead of them. Still, he couldn't help but wish to have a boat. Something to keep them dry. Still, he turned his gaze to the island ahead. They would be there soon, and with it, the devil. The Hippocampus is a rather odd creature to say the least. It depends heavily on Poseidon for its impressive abilities. Thank you for watching, adventurers. Please return next time for the Will-O-the-Wisp. Until then, I'll see you on the roads.